There's Just Something About Kansas City is brought to you in part by the generosity of our friends at the Cockrell Family Foundation and the Sherman Family Foundation. Thank you.
Welcome to another episode of There's Just Something About Kansas City, and there's just something about this place. We are out at the K with Royals owner John Sherman. And John, thanks so much for taking some time. I know how busy you are. We're right in the middle of a baseball season, where you guys are, just battling every night, day in, day out, for a playoff spot, or even now still to win the division. So you're right in the middle of it. It's the middle of August, and I know the tarp's down on the field, but there's nothing that can put a damper on you and this baseball team and all the things that are happening this year.
So. No, it's fun. I mean, this was the objective, to play meaningful baseball late into the summer, and we're doing that. So that's very exciting. Our manager, I can dream a little bit as an owner, but our manager is very focused, one day at a time. But
Right.
I can look ahead a little bit. I can scoreboard watch. But our guys, baseball's a funny game, like last night, right? They got to put that behind them. We'll play the Twins again tonight, and they have these T-shirts that just says today, and so they've got the right approach. But I'm dreaming a little bit about what could happen, and some really exciting nights could be here.
Right.
But we got a lot of work to do. But it's certainly been our objective to get back to relevance in Major League Baseball, and we're right on the cusp of it.
You said a great thing. That's what's great about baseball. You lose a night, you got a game the next day.
Right.
Or we get a day off to, think about it and then get back to work on, the day after that.
Yeah, you can redeem yourself tomorrow, or if you win tonight, you can't wait to get until you get back to the ballpark.
Yeah, and they have had so many come from behind victories. It's just incredible. Number one in baseball with 33 at this point. I know this is supposed to be an evergreen, but we'll just let people know it's, the middle of August in 2024, and we're right in the middle of it here right now. So.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'd like to have a laugher every once in a while.
That's no fun. Come on. The come from behinds and the excitement is what brings people out.
No, what's been great about it, we got down to the Cardinals, I think, by 4-2. There was no panic, right? I mean, that's the great thing about it. Early in a game, if you're down by 2, you give up an early run, you don't sweat it. You're still in this thing.
And they don't either.
That's what
it's like some teams usually get down they'll be down by 2 runs and they're done. The game's over for them,
No, I think last year, we had a young team. We supplemented it with veterans. Our starting pitching has been elite this year, but just the confidence that they've developed. Last year, if we got down early, I'm not saying we didn't have some comebacks, but this team, I'm not leaving until there's 3 outs in the ninth.
You bet. That's the way to do it. Do you ever, you bought the team back in 19,
right?
Okay. Have you ever walked into this stadium and gone, God, pinch yourself and just go, I own the Kansas City Royals? And I know you have other owners with you, and I know you feel you're a steward for the Kansas City Royals. You're a steward of this team to just bring it back to where it is in prominence in Major League Baseball. But just the idea that you basically are the majority owner of the Kansas City Royals.
Yeah, do I ever walk out? I pinch myself every day, but I also take the responsibility of being a steward very, very seriously on behalf of the other owners and people in the ownership group, but also our players, our staff, our fans in this community.
Yeah, so for you just to come in here and you're just the third owner of this team. It's amazing. You and Kaufman and David Glass. There's just been tremendous continuity with the ownership, and I just think that's really important.
Right, I think people, Ewan Kaufman, all that he did to bring baseball back after the A's left in 68 or 60, whenever it was to get baseball back here in 69, we owe a lot to Ewan Kaufman for that, but also what he did to make sure this team stayed here. We bought the team, people would stop me all over town, thanks for keeping the team here. Look, we're not going anywhere, right? But this team they were vulnerable when the Community Foundation owned it, and David Glass ultimately stepped up, and then when David called me in early 2019, that they'd made that decision, that was quite the phone call. But I felt like that call was in the spirit of Ewan Kaufman, right? It's we're the smallest market, maybe us, Cleveland, Cincinnati, we're all close, that have an MLB team and an NFL franchise. It makes us a major league city. So those, I think, it goes way beyond sports, right? It's about its economic impact, it's the way we feel about ourselves, and so these franchises are really important to this town, and I'm in deep gratitude to both Ewan Kaufman and David Glass for having made that handoff.
tell me the story, or is it the urban myth you missed the original phone call from David Glass?
I did. I was on a golf course.
Oh boy! And you probably didn't have your phone on, right? Because you're on a golf course.
I had it on actually, and we were. I was down at spring training with Cleveland Guardians in Goodyear, but we were playing golf, and my phone did. I pulled it out, and it was from Arkansas, and I really just thought that's somebody trying
spam call.
Yeah, trying to sell me a Medicare supplement or something like that, and so anyway, we finished playing. We got back. We headed toward the facility, the Indians or the Guardians facility in Goodyear, and I had a voicemail. It was from David Glass. Very matter of fact. Hey John, give me a call if you get a chance. And so I was actually I was at a Guardians spring training game. I found a quiet spot to call him, and he said, John, I don't know if we can solve this since you've got that ownership in Cleveland, but families decided to sell the team. You'd be our first choice. And yeah, basically I said, look, David, the wheels were spinning, but I said, do me a favor, don't do anything until I get back to you. Right. And he agreed to do that.
Yeah.
And so I talked to my partner in Cleveland. I talked to the commissioner. And long story short, everybody coalesced around that. We put together a group and closed in November of 19.
Yeah, right. And so what people, and we sort of skipped over, you were a minority owner at that time, an investor with the Cleveland Guardians.
Right.
That's how you got into baseball, basically,
right,
through
which was really, I kind of owe that to David Glass as well. I called on him in 2014, right after they lost to the Giants here in Game 7. It was that November. And he wasn't going anywhere, but he really advised me to think about getting involved with it. If this is something you want to do,
right.
We had sort of control of our company. Sports was interesting to me. It was very different from what I'd done, but the intersection of business and sports. And so he introduced me to the commissioner. But in that meeting, I did. This kind of goes back to that phone call I was just talking about. In that meeting, I said, David, if you're ever thinking about a succession plan for the Royals, keep us in mind. And I really thought that landed like a ton of bricks. I mean, he changed the subject on me, and but then 5 years later, when he called me, he said, John, since you asked.
Since you asked 5 years ago.
Yeah, since you asked. I mean, that's really what he said before he said you'd be our first choice. He said, since you asked. And I tell my kids all the time, do not be afraid to ask, because I really thought they were going to keep the team, maybe keep it in the family.
Yes.
But between that, and then I also got to know him. I served on the audit committee, which he chaired of Major League Baseball when I was vice chair of the Cleveland team. And so got to know him better over that period of time too. So that you never know, you got to be lucky to get to be able to do this in a whole variety of ways. But the serendipity, being in the right place at the right time was pretty remarkable.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know the vetting process to be in ownership for a Major League Baseball team. I mean, you get the FBI involved. Everybody is involved. They tear your entire life apart to vet you for an ownership, let alone total ownership of a team, but even to become an investor in a baseball team. What was that like?
Well, it was just a process. We David and I think, had agreed on a value in. Trying to think, that was in March, sometime that spring, and we didn't sign our contract till August. So we worked on that about 6 months, and then we had to wait for Major League approval, which included that vetting process and then a vote of all the other owners as well. But no, it's a funny. My wife called me one day and said, "There's some guys at the door, and they're with the FBI." And I said, "That can't be part of it." Well, it turned out one of my neighbors was getting a presidential appointment or something, so they were checking on him. But I said,
the black suits and the sunglasses and the whole deal, right?
I don't know, but I wasn't there, But that was kind of funny. So they certainly can't be using the FBI. But it's a process, and we've been through. There's been some new owners since Steve Cohen bought the Mets.
Yes.
David Rubenstein recently bought the Orioles. So, it's all part of what the 29 other partners need to feel good about. I mean, that's really a big part of it. There's the background check and the investigation, and but it's really about getting good people that can sustain themselves and really manage these franchises for success.
Yeah, right. It's not just the owner or ownership. It is everybody under that umbrella, from front office personnel to
Right.
ticket people to,
Totally.
group sales to whatever you're trying, bobblehead night, everything
Right.
you're trying to do.
Right.
You know, you're getting the national anthem singers out here. So,
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Because I remember my wife Sarah, she has sung a few times.
I
so
remember
she,
that.
so it was the process of getting her on the field and the whole thing. So
Yeah.
it's really interesting.
It is the choreography is really. I mean, I was in the energy business before. It's like putting on 81 rock concerts
Yeah.
here. When I think all the logistics, right? Getting people in the parking lot and people in the control room. You talk about the run of show and the national anthem and keeping those things sequenced right. It's a big deal, and particularly complying with the television broadcast. That all.
Yeah.
You don't really have a lot of margin for
No,
error.
it's timing.
Right.
No, we don't want you to sing a 2-minute national anthem. Minute 35 is fine.
No, we get compliments from all over the country about our game day people.
Yeah.
Here. The ushers, the parking lot attendants. It's really an outstanding group. I think part of that is Kansas City, right? I mean, it's Midwest, but certainly Kansas City.
Yeah, just something about the people here. Just
Right,
something about
right.
KC, and that's the way it is. If you hadn't been a minority owner in Cleveland, do you still think, with David Glass's blessing, would you still think David Glass would have thought of you the same way, or Major League Baseball would have thought of you the same way, or do you think that Cleveland inroad really helped pave the way for you to be
Yeah, I
here
don't think
today?
there's any doubt. You never know what, but I was able to build those relationships
Yeah.
with David and other owners and the commissioner of baseball, and so that was very helpful, no doubt.
Okay, let's go back and how you got to this position. You were actually born in Japan.
Right.
Your dad was in the Air Force, correct?
Right.
And I know that, I'm sure Kurt Nelson from the Hall of Fame has told you this fact. You were born on April 12th, 1955, right?
Right.
If you were a woman sitting here, I wouldn't give away her age. But you were born on April 12th, 1955. Opening day of the Kansas City Athletics
Right.
in Kansas City.
Right.
That is, I mean, you were almost destined to be
Right.
where you are today.
It is
That's
an amazing
phenomenal.
fact,
Yeah.
It's another little tidbit there. Harry Truman threw out the first pitch that day. And of course, back then they did it from the stands, and they're all wearing coats and ties.
Oh, yeah.
It's a different. But that was 10 years to the day. April 12, 1945, was when Franklin D. Roosevelt passed away.
Oh, gosh.
And this little-known senator of Missouri became leader of the free world.
That's right.
10 years to the day, he threw out the first pitch at Municipal. That happens to be the day I was born.
Gosh. Did you ever go, this is where I'm supposed to be?
It's a little interesting. I've got a picture of Harry Truman actually throwing out the first pitch, and it says April 12th. I guess now my age is exposed.
Well, that's okay.
1955.
Don't worry, I'm older than you are, so don't feel bad about it at all. You were born in Japan. How long were you there?
We left there when I was just a year old.
Okay,
Yeah.
right. And you're the oldest of 7?
Oldest of
Is
7,
that right?
right.
Your dad was in the Air Force?
Right.
God bless your mom for dragging everybody all
Right.
around the
Right.
world at that
Exactly.
point. Then when you left Japan, you went to?
My dad had a series of assignments. He actually got his. We were in Japan because of the Korean conflict,
Yes.
and then I guess it would have been '56. But he had a series of assignments that really. He ended up getting his education, becoming an officer in the Air Force. He got his undergraduate degree at Nebraska Omaha, and then he got his MBA at Indiana. So we had a number of assignments that he did that. He was also a navigator. They don't have those anymore, but he was.
Right.
And then he spent a year in Vietnam. That was 67, 68.
God
Tet
bless him.
Offensive,
Yes.
I remember being in 8th grade. That was a frightening time.
Scary
for a
time
family,
for you,
right?
yes, absolutely.
And so, and then long story short, I split my high school years between Washington D.C. when he was at the Pentagon and Colorado Springs when he was at the Air Force Academy.
So he went. Yeah, he wasn't at Peterson Air Force Base, and he was at the Air Force Academy.
He was at
in
the Air
Colorado
Force
Springs.
Academy. Right?
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
So what was he doing in Washington D.C. before he?
He
hit the Air
was
Force
because
Academy?
of his. After he got his MBA, he really was on the business side of the Air Force. So he actually worked in the. I think it was the controller's office, management analysis, at the Pentagon.
Yeah. And then he went to Air Force Academy as?
Same thing. He was really on the business side. You know, he would
Okay.
do some guest lecturing in their business school, but he was really in management analysis and on the business side of the academy. And then he made the decision to retire there. He, you know, they loved it there.
It's a
the kids
beautiful
were,
place, yes.
You know, I was heading on, but the other 6 kids, so it was time.
Yeah, they all
And,
stayed.
and that became their kind of forever place.
Yeah, so
after that.
don't tell me they're Colorado Rockies and Denver Broncos.
Well, they
fans.
were. Although my dad's he was still a Broncos fan. He passed away in October, and it's really funny because he went to hospice right after the Broncos beat the Chiefs for the first time in quite a while.
Yeah, right.
We kidded him about that. That okay, Dad, now you can go. But I think he definitely stayed a Broncos fan, but he converted to a Royals fan big time.
Yeah.
You know, he lived in Arizona after my mom passed away, and then he would be there for spring training. And I think he went to, I'll bet the last 3 years of his life, he went to over 20 spring training games in Surprise, you know, and he wasn't getting around real well, but the staff there was great. They took him up the
Everybody
elevator,
took care of him.
stuck him. Yeah. Oh, yeah, he had his own parking space, which was closer than the managers to the clubhouse. He loved, I mean, he loved every minute of that experience.
That's great. Well, I'm sorry for your loss.
No, thank you.
Yeah,
No,
and
he lived
you know,
a
God bless him for
full
his
life,
service.
for
Yeah,
sure.
He definitely did. So all your siblings stayed there, and you obviously were a high school football player, and I know you're
Right.
also, what people don't realize, you also played baseball, but you're definitely a high school football player. Talk about that a little bit of your last 2 years there in high school in Colorado Springs,
Right.
and how you ended up at Ottawa University.
You know, I actually only played my senior year.
That was the only time you ever played football?
No. I played at
I'm
St.
sorry.
John's College High School in Washington, D.C.
Oh, yeah,
my
St. John's,
first 3 years.
military, yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and then you know, he became the head coach after that. You know, Gary Barnett was actually, you know, he went on to coach Colorado,
Yes.
Northwestern Colorado, and he was an assistant, and he had a connection with somebody in Ottawa, and so I went out there and visited. It was an NAIA school. I thought I could play, and so, and that was a great experience.
Yeah. Did you get to play?
Yeah, I was the
Yeah.
starting quarterback
That's
there
a-
for 3 years.
yeah, that's
in
what I
the-
thought,
in the
yeah.
70s, and you know those are some of my best friends in the world today. You know,
Yeah.
because of that shared experience that we had there together.
Yeah, mine too. I still go every year. I go back to Pennsylvania and meet up with the old guys I played high school and college football with.
Yeah, the
And it's
stories
just-
get better.
you get so much better. I said, my gosh,
no
I
doubt.
was really good, wasn't I?
No
Well,
doubt.
don't overstep your bounds there. Yeah, but you also played baseball. You're the captain, I think, of your high school baseball team. I don't think a whole lot of people knew that, did they? They thought you were this football player, and how do you end up with all this baseball stuff?
Well, I love baseball. I mean,
Yeah.
baseball, and you know, being with the Royals and Cleveland as well, it just became. I fell in love with it at another level. Right, it's a fascinating game. I mean, just and now I really appreciate much more the matchups and just all the things that we do in baseball. Think about baseball, you know, the NFL and the NBA. We kind of rely on Division I NCAA for their farm system. Right?
Oh, absolutely.
We've got 4 affiliates in the U.S. We have a complex in Arizona. We have a Dominican academy in the Dominican Republic with 2 teams, probably 250 players, and just to hopefully find a way to get a 26-man roster and put 9 guys out here on the field. It is the scale and scope of what it takes to build a major. It's really one of a kind.
Right. And I don't think people realize that the currency of baseball, I know I've heard this, is pitching, but the currency of baseball is a great farm system, because when you get to the trading deadline, you'll see all these teams make these deals for these players, and they're trading minor league. This guy's number 1 in their high A. This guy's number 1 in AAA. This guy's, and they're trading these 3 guys for this name player they're bringing in, but these other teams are trading these minor league baseball players. That's why it's so important have this influx of
especially
players.
in a small market like Kansas City, and not just for the trade value and the currency, but that some of those players you want to keep. You take a Bobby Witt Jr. Now we signed a long-term deal but the cost certainty of him in his early years, you know, and others that like we have. I mean, I think our whole infield's homegrown, right? Michael Massey, Benny Pasquantino, Michael Garcia, Bobby, and you know, really some of the young guys in the outfield too. MJ, that's really important that you're bringing up talent that you keep, but you hope that you have a surplus of talent,
right?
So that if you're in it, JJ and I talked a lot going into the trade, and I trust him to make the right decisions. But the philosophy was let's try to get better here. We want to make the playoffs, but let's not mortgage our future. Let's protect our prospect value. So maybe there's something to do in the off season, and also we got some guys that we expect are in the farm right now that will play baseball out here at Coffee Stadium.
Yeah, for this baseball team. And it also gives those guys, it's a lot like the team 13, 14, 15, that core of guys who are your homegrown guys. It's important because then they feel an obligation. This has been my franchise, and they feel an obligation for the opportunities that you gave them.
No doubt. And they came up, they played together. I think that was part of Bobby's desire to stay here. It had to be right. He had to believe that we were going to commit to winning, but he loves the guys he came up with, and doing this together, he thought would be very meaningful to him.
Yeah.
Now, we had to pay him. Right. You did have to pay him. But he had a lot of other options, and he could have waited to enter free agency a couple of years from now.
Yeah, you actually did too. I mean, there could have been a time before he signed this contract, saw what kind of player this kid was going to be, that you could have gone, one of those trade prospects, you could have gone, this kid is going to be great. Let's get all of this. Let's get all this stuff, and we'll trade him to whomever wants him. But that didn't happen, thank goodness, because now he's definitely an MVP race. I think everybody around here believes he should be the MVP. Problem is, you have a guy in the Yankees that is going to be his top competition, and it's going to be.
He's got my vote.
He's got mine too.
He's a special player. When we were leading up to that deal, if you looked at he was 21 years old playing in the major leagues a couple of years ago, right? But if you looked at what he did last year, and particularly from June on, he was doing things that hadn't been done in baseball ever.
Right.
And so that really made us a lot more comfortable. And of course, look what he's done this year.
Right.
It seems like there's a new milestone every week that no one's ever done this in the history of baseball.
Yeah, and at this point, you're looking at the next George Brett for this franchise. A guy you can just
even
hang
George
your hat
might
on.
admit that.
Yeah, I'm sure George would admit it. Yeah, because I know a lot of people who were called up here to play baseball here. We're going to be the next George Brett, and it didn't happen. And this kid comes along and just
It's unusual to see a kid like this.
Wow,
and just generational talent.
Yeah.
To keep him in the same uniform is real meaningful to this.
And while we're on that subject, he actually attracts players from other team, free agents that would like to sign here and play with this kid, and to see the trajectory of the Kansas City Royals and what the ownership and everybody's trying to do.
No doubt. I think that helped us this offseason. Even the veterans like Michael Walker, Seth Lugo. Of
course, Salvi is Salvi.
Salvi.
Yeah,
Salvi loves Bobby, though.
Yeah.
I mean, Salvi, think about a player like Salvi and how much he thinks of Bobby Witt. That could go the other way in a lot of situations.
Absolutely.
And Salvi's saying things like, I'm going to tell my grandkids I played with Bobby Witt Jr. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah,
and those two guys, they really are the leaders of the team. There's lots of people now, I think, but Bobby's the kind of the future, and Salvi is the glue that's kind of gotten us here.
Salvi's basically passing the baton.
Right.
That's why he's doing it, and he sees the perfect guy to do it, a guy who wants to be here and bring the franchise along. We skipped right past how you got to this point. You graduate from Ottawa, and you're thinking, what are you thinking career-wise at that point?
Well, I get my first job, just you think about how you get to I think the premise of your podcast, right, is there's something about Kansas City. Why do all these people come here, stay here? And it was nothing other than I got my first job here, right? I got my first job with AT&T right out of college, kind of settled in, loved the city. I mean, I was young and lots to do, professional sports. It was just a lot of fun. Met my wife, I met my wife there. We actually both worked at AT&T separately, and but yeah, I think just one thing led to another. I was in the telecommunications industry for a number of years, and then transitioned to the energy industry. Went to work for Ferrell Gas up in.
What was your thinking when you left AT&T to go to Ferrell?
It wasn't. It's interesting because telecom was kind of the industry of the future, right?
Yes,
This is,
sure was.
yeah, and but I was recruited. I went up there and visited with the folks at Farrell, and a little bit it was a more mature industry, the energy business, the propane business was their core business, and but I was really fascinated at how they were taking an innovative approach to a mature industry, and one thing led to another. I poured myself into a 7-year career at Farrell Gas, and then ultimately started a couple companies in the energy sector after that.
Yeah, and that's what really propelled you to get into a situation where you would be financially in a position to be able to do what you did when you bought the Kansas City Royals. So you obviously were extremely successful, and I know you gloss over it, and I know you don't like to talk about yourself, but you're born in Japan, raised Air Force. I think a lot of people who don't know you think, oh, well, he's from a really rich family, and he just, he didn't have to do any of this stuff, it just happened for him.
Yeah.
And this is so rare in this industry, in Major League Baseball and in ownership of professional teams, that it's extremely rare. I'll just put it that way.
You mean that
there's someone that can come up from that kind of a situation.
If you look around the room,
rise to this.
Look around the room at our owners' meetings. There's some folks but a lot of them, had more wealth. Early on. But look, I've been very, very fortunate, but no, and it was really the two companies we built, LPG Services, and then Energy was the one that really created the wealth to be able to do something like this. Right. So we took the company public, grew it, sold it, and so but I mean it's all the same thing, right? It's about getting great people around you, agreeing on a goal, and also recognizing that things aren't going to go. The thing about business, that's the other thing I think people think, okay, you got the Midas touch, it's all. Yeah. Look, businesses, one thing I can tell you about, you start a couple of businesses, one thing I can tell you, you're going to be confronted by something that you didn't, no matter how painstaking the business plan was, you're going to be confronted by stuff you didn't anticipate it, and it will happen early and it will happen often. And so you really need people around you. You need teams that can adapt, and especially in today's world, right? I always like to say, the only thing that's certain is uncertainty.
Yeah, right.
And we saw it again. We acquired the Royals. We acquired the Royals in November of 19, and the world came to a halt about 4 months later.
Yeah.
We got shut down in spring training. We were playing out here in front of what do they call them?
The cardboard cutouts.
The cardboard cutouts, right? Patrick Mahomes was in the front row there. But it was eerie. It was a strange. I'm getting off the subject.
No, you're not.
A little bit, but you think about, we were out here as owners, and we had piped-in crowd noise, and it was just a bizarre. But it was really important that we got baseball back on the field because we got it back on television. Yeah. If you think about 2020. People were watching cornhole championships and stuff, or waking up at 3 a.m. watching Korean. They were starved for live sports. I mean, that is one thing that we learned, if we didn't already know it, how important live sports are. Yeah,
right. And you only played 60 games.
Right.
That year, it was just 60 games there, and then next year
we only got 41 left now, or something like that, 43.
Right. It's just
a
just
sprint.
Amazing.
That was a sprint, and now we're in a sprint.
It's just crazy. And then 21, we're starting to come out of it, but still no big crowds. Yeah. People are sitting in, areas or something at that point. Remember, they have 20 here and 15 over here or whatever.
Yeah, I think we started with 10,000 capacity in 21, and I think that bumped up in maybe May, and then we went full.
Yeah, right.
I think after June. I believe that's right.
But
still, that affected that year.
Oh, sure it did.
And then we had a work stoppage in the third year, and then we had to make some. Then we lost 106 games. So, my point is, look, all businesses have challenges, right? And I remember one of our investors when we hit the wall there in 2020, we got shut down. One of our investors said, "Don't worry about it, John. Almost every investment I've made started off really poorly, but they turn out okay." And I think you think about I think a lot about the lessons learned in business when we did hit that crisis in 2020, right? And when I was talking about business, right? We took our company public.
And this is a business. I mean,
it's a business.
It's a business,
right? That's what I have to tell people. These are real jobs, you know,
Right.
when they want to
Try
come
to tell Marny that. Yeah.
when they
Okay,
want to
go
come to
ahead.
work here. These are real jobs. But you know, when we took our company public in '01, it was 6 weeks before 9/11. So I mean, there's an example, right? A fragile young company.
Yeah.
You know, the market shut down for a week, but you know, you learn from those experiences. And then '08, '09, the financial crisis, right? And so when this hit us in when the pandemic hit, and we had just bought a baseball team, right? You don't want to overreact, but you don't want to underreact. You want to be decisive but thoughtful. And the main thing is not to panic, because you know, baseball wasn't going anywhere. You know, if you'd have to.
You didn't survive world wars as well.
Yeah, it's not just a pandemic. It's going to have an end to it. So we have to figure out how to get through it. I was very proud of, you know, we were new owners of the franchise. Very proud of the decisions we made. We didn't furlough. We didn't lay anybody off. We
Yeah.
didn't furlough anybody.
Commend you for that. Yeah.
Paid our minor leaguers, and so those are the kind of things that. But anyway, I would just say that, you know, falling back on those lessons, and you know, it's not going to all be smooth, right?
Right.
And so, but from the time we bought the team, you know, we'd lost 100 games 2 years in a row. We're a few years removed from having won the championship out here. But it was all about preparing to win, right? You're not going to do it overnight.
Got to build a base.
Build a base and keep your eye on the prize, right?
Yeah.
But you got to have some patience.
Well, you have to look at the big picture too. Just, you know, this fans look at season to season.
Well, as you know, right?
Yes.
This is there's not a lot of there's no patience on the part.
Hey, listen, a loss here, you know, like they say, if you win, they throw a parade for you. If you lose, they throw things at you.
Right.
So
right.
that's just the way that stuff
right.
works.
When I was first talked to a sports banker, he said, John, if you want everybody to love you all the time, give all your money to the hospitals and the colleges. But if now they won't love you all the time if you own a sports team, but when you do win, they will throw a parade for you.
Yeah.
And it's the only industry in the world with its own section in the newspapers.
That's right. That's right.
So those are just different things. But you know, one of the things that sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not good. But the worst thing would be silence, right?
Yeah.
And when you're hearing people complain about what you're doing, that is passion.
It's okay.
And they're going to be the best fans when you turn that thing around.
Yeah, right. Was there ever a point, and I know the answer to this, I'm sure already since just talking, was there ever a point you went, my God, what did I do? In the beginning, you go to COVID, you go to nobody's here, we go to 56 wins and 106 losses.
No, never did that.
So that's definitely looking at the big picture.
Look, every loss, it's funny in baseball, we were just talking about that, right? You play every night, so you have to keep it in perspective, right? The best teams lose 60 games in baseball, the worst teams win. So if you're one of the best teams, you got to find a way to smile on those 60 days. But it doesn't mean that every loss doesn't hurt. Every single loss hurts, right? When you drive home after a loss, but then you got to get back up the next morning and it's behind you.
Yeah, and you can't. I mean, because you're going to play that day. It's not like the guys across the parking lot.
You're going out playing the best baseball players on the planet. You better, you better show
You
up.
better bring it every night. Yeah, absolutely. And the competitive, that's where you get the competitive edge. And that's why I got great guys like Bobby and Sal, who are just incredible. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about Marny. You sell the companies, and Marny thinks, okay, we're going to retire. We're going to travel. Talk about meeting her in the beginning. I know you went to a Royals game, and I think it was a Yankees game.
It was a Yankees game.
But you can't remember whether they won or lost?
Right.
Okay.
I really don't.
Yeah.
I make the joke, we're still married, so I guess I won the date. But
you did win the date, yeah.
But
so talk about meeting her.
We're in GA out here, right field.
Perfect.
Left field GA. I think it was $1.50. I think it was before they raised it to $3. You know, when everybody screamed and yelled at Mr. Kaufman.
$3.
Right.
Crazy, yeah.
Right.
So but you met her at work?
Well, actually, I didn't meet her at work. I met her. We happen to both work at AT&T, but we met through mutual friends outside of work. Actually.
Okay, yeah. And so it was like, 40 years later, it's still wrong. So you decide. I think one of her classic lines, was, "You didn't even play baseball. Why are you buying a baseball team?"
Yeah. Well, but there was some discussion, and particularly initially. The real issue was, why are you buying why are you buying in Cleveland?
Yes.
I mean, that was really things changed. She loved it when we bought the Royals. I mean,
okay. Because it's hometown for her.
Yeah, I think there's always the normal concerns about, you lose some privacy. This
Yeah.
and all that. But she is enjoying. Of course, she's enjoying this more too. You know.
Oh yeah.
And she started to go into more Chiefs games after Patrick Mahomes. I call her playoff Marny in football. but she's enjoying this. She's learning a lot more about baseball, particularly this year.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
And these young players.
yeah.
It's a great group of young players. They're not only what they're doing in the field, they're doing great things in the community too.
Yeah.
And that's really gratifying.
Right. And before we get to the kids, and of course, philanthropy, which has been absolutely incredible in this town, which I don't think a whole lot of people realize because you really don't talk about yourself very much. Before you bought the Royals, was there a chance to purchase another baseball team that you would have thought of buying at that time? Like, say, if Mr. Dolan in Cleveland had decided to sell.
We actually had a deal for where we would have the right to buy control of the Cleveland team.
Okay, but that just never materialized at that time.
Once this opportunity came about, it was. Look, I loved it in Cleveland. It's a great organization. I enjoyed every minute of it.
Now they're one of your biggest rivals.
Learned a lot, learned a lot. But to be able to do this in your hometown, it's
phenomenal. Yeah,
it's different. I mean, it changed the whole thing. So we're certainly motivated to. Again, I had to work out. I had to sell my Cleveland.
Yes.
And that wasn't easy because they gave us. Because once the pandemic hit, everybody froze, right?
Oh,
so it took us a little while to do that, but I had a trustee that, I was blocked away from obviously the baseball stuff in the business. You can't own two teams.
Right, in Major League Baseball.
Right, and now they will allow passive ownership of two teams, for some of the funds.
Yes,
now,
right.
But you can't be an active owner in two teams.
Right, which makes sense.
Yeah, I mean,
you worry about collusion.
Right,
you
it's
worry about all
interesting.
kinds of
We're
stuff.
business partners. The 30 owners are business partners in everything else except what happens down.
Right.
We want to beat each other up down there, but we want to work together to grow the game of baseball.
Right, and you are on a lot of the committees, and I think that shows the trust they have in you, what they think about you as an owner and as a person to be able, because you're in the, you're on the, committee Pro Development League. Okay,
Right.
You're the executive director there, or the chairman there. Ownership committee, labor policy, relocation, et cetera, et cetera. You got the A's out there,
Now, that was a temporary role, the relocation. That was specific to that deal.
Yeah, to that deal.
But the commissioner, I think, interestingly, this is a little side story, but there was a 3-person committee. It was Mark Antanasio of the Brewers, but then the other 2 members were me and John Middleton of the Phillies, which were the 2 towns that lost the A's.
Right.
That was coincidental. It was totally coincidental.
This all goes back to your birthday.
Selected us, right? But the A's went from Philadelphia to Kansas City, and from Kansas City to Oakland.
Right.
Now they're going to Las Vegas, but that was an interesting because it did give me a different perspective.
Yeah, it did.
Knowing the history here.
You talked about passive ownership. We're going to get to the family here in a minute, but you talked about passive ownership. You could have owned. Were you ever interested in any other kind of pro franchise, whether it be NFL, NBA?
I did when I was doing that investigative work for when I met with David. I did look at a couple of other things, in soccer and the NFL, minority stake in the NFL. But fortunately, those things didn't work out because we were ready to do this when the opportunity came.
Sure. So let's talk big picture, longevity. Let's talk about, are the kids interested in becoming owners of the Kansas City Royals somewhere down the line? Or do you have a succession plan at this point?
Well,
I know you're still a young man.
We have a succession plan, and if something were to happen, certainly in the ownership group, we have some really capable people.
Yeah.
We've also built a strong management team, internally, outside of the ownership group. But as far as the kids go, they're all doing their own thing. They all have their own lives.
Talk about them. Talk about the kids. Yeah.
Well, they're all just doing. They're all doing different things, right? We have 2 here in Kansas City, and we have 1 in Arizona, and then 1 in Chicago. My youngest is in Chicago, but they're all doing great things, and I wouldn't want to distract them from that. It's always interesting. I think, how do you help your kids? We all go through this, right?
Yeah.
How do you help your kids but not help them too much, right? Because
Yeah.
why rob them? We just talked about our beginnings, right? Why rob them of the opportunity to carve out their own,
Absolutely.
like we had, like I had, right? Who knows what happens if you're given too many things too early.
Yes,
So,
I agree
so
totally.
that-
And you know that from your background and upbringing. If you'd been brought up a different way, if you had the silver spoon, it would have been totally different, basically.
Right.
Your philosophy in life would have been totally different.
I had one owner tell me at a dinner one night, he said, "John, I don't know a lot about your background, but I bet there was a day you didn't have two nickels to rub together." And I said, "Yeah, kind of," because I knew it.
Right.
I'm not sure what he meant by that.
That's
but-
right. Yeah. Yeah, you bet. Well, and then the $1.50 tickets for the date with Marny, right?
Cheap date.
That's
Sure.
exactly right. 06, of course. Remember, this is well before you had bought the Kansas City Royals, but you opened you have the Sherman Family Foundation. It's all about education for you, isn't it? And literacy specifically, isn't it? So talk about the philanthropy and the literacy program and how you got involved.
I think it's all about making Kansas City a better place, right? And education, to me, and Marny, we've thought this for a long time, is the way that we can have the most impact, right? And particularly in areas of the city where there are families with high economic needs, but these kids are capable and motivated. They have big dreams for themselves. But the idea is, really the philosophy is that where you end up shouldn't be dictated by where you start.
Right.
And so that's been our focus. When you talk about, I'm really proud of what the Royals are doing now. I think the literacy, reading at grade level is a super important point in a person's life that we sometimes don't think about. But we've got the Royals Literacy League, which is a joint venture kind of between the Sherman Foundation, Royals Foundation, and School Smart, which is and that is about, really it's about inspiration. Leo Morton, I don't know if you know Leo Morton.
I do know Leo.
He told me one time, he said, "John, look, we'll get the curriculum, we'll understand the science of teaching, but how do we inspire? How do we inspire young people that may or may not, be in environments where that's difficult to do?" And so that's really what this Royals Literacy, we have players that have been we have 8 elementary schools in the Kansas City, Missouri School District, and Bobby Witt has been to one of their classes, and Vinny Pascantino. Can you imagine what a second grader, and Bobby Witt comes into his classroom and he cares enough that he wants to help. And so what we've been able to do is that we don't know the science of teaching reading, right? But we can use this platform, Major League Baseball franchise, and these players have been great to really inspire kids and teachers and families and make reading more fun.
Right.
And then on top of that, we're going to help them with the science, right? Instructional coaches, we'll fund instructional coaches in the classroom, high dosage tutoring, things like that will raise that, increase the number of kids in Kansas City that are reading at grade level.
Yes.
And at the end of the day, we all benefit from that, right? We all benefit when more of us have the opportunity to reach our potential.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially, those young kids, when they get to the grade specific level of reading, they participate in class more, whatever. If they fall behind, they just become silent. They just back off and they won't do anything.
There's lots of things that happen. There's lots of data on what happens if you're not reading. This is a sad thing, right? Because it's so early, and it's not the end. But if there's some data, if you're not reading at third grade level, when you hit third grade, it's you go one direction versus another.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. Yeah.
Now, we can still intervene and help them later, but it's such a critical point in their lives that's where we're trying to invest.
Yeah. And again, that has a lot to do with Kansas City.
It's all about
this
Kansas
area.
City.
Yeah, really, it does. You live in Jackson County,
right?
Obviously.
Right.
We'll talk a little bit about downtown baseball. Okay, I know that was your dream. You bought this team, and that was your first thing. You said, "I'd love to have a downtown." That is still your dream, to have a downtown baseball.
I think baseball should be, because of the 81 nights a year, I think you should put a Major League Baseball franchise in a place where you can have impact, a high density area where you can not only bring energy and vibrancy 81 nights a year, but you generate economic activity 365 days a
Right.
year. And you look around the country, look, this was a visionary project.
Right.
However many years ago it was, two
Yeah.
side-by-side, single sports venues. That was
First one.
Lamar Hunt's vision, and it became really the model, right? The single sport venues. And I think for the Chiefs, I think this still, and for the NFL, if you want 20,000 surface parking places, the big tailgate,
Here it is.
8 or 10, no, it's made to order. But I think baseball, I just think we can, this has been a great place to play, and it still is. I just think we can do so much more, again, for Kansas City. If we take baseball in a place where we could do things, outside the ballpark and also on more days than the 81
Right.
nights a year. Now the conversation is not about if, it's really about if, when and where and how, right? Kind of like the airport. I would say that similar to the airport. The airport was
Took a while.
There was a point there though that the discussion didn't. If are we going to have a new airport? How are we going to do it?
Yeah, right.
And
Yeah.
so I think that's where the conversation. But we got some time. I don't think we have a lot of time, but I'm saying we have some time. Our lease here runs through the 2030 season.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And it takes a while.
But which is also why we try to get ahead of it. I mean,
Yeah.
You mentioned
still have to-
Oakland. I was on the relocation. That is a cautionary tale. For you got to get communities together early on. They worked on that thing for 15 years and it didn't end well. That's not going to happen here.
Right.
I don't bring it up from that perspective, but you have to have urgency before you're backed into a corner.
Right. Yeah, and they lost both franchises. They lost the Raiders too.
Well, they lost the Golden State.
And Golden State Warriors.
Out of Oakland, anyway.
Yeah, they're gone from Oakland. Yeah, Oakland itself.
Yeah, they're still there.
Which was, a situation a lot like this was with the two stadiums and the whole thing. So
Yeah.
it was-
Now we have this is a much better stadium still than the Oakland Coliseum.
Oh gosh!
Although it's interesting.
I've got stories about the Oakland.
Well, the nostalgia
Coliseum.
though, the nostalgia you think about. I had my first date here. I've talked to fans here all the time.
Yeah.
I took my, now I took my kids. I took my grandkids. I took
Sure.
my kids in '85. My grandkids in '15. But there's fans in Oakland that don't want to leave the Coliseum.
I know.
I mean, when I was
I
on
have no idea
I've
why.
got a stack of mail like this. People wrote books about it when I was on that committees. But I think it goes back to the passion of sports fans, right?
Yeah.
Baseball fans.
That's just the way they
really
are.
important that, I think about the responsibility that I have, that we have for the Kansas City Royals is to, is for our fans, and for this community.
Yeah.
Because I do take seriously the responsibility. I do feel like that call came from you and Kaufman, and I knew you mentioned where that lineup. There's a reason that the Kansas City Royals are still here,
That's right.
and we're going to make sure they're here for another 50
Yeah,
years.
and remember, you always have to remember they did lose the A's, okay,
Right.
and they've lost a hockey franchise and they lost an NBA franchise, so that can happen.
You got to be
there's no doubt about
proactive.
that.
You
Yeah.
got to stay ahead of it.
Yeah.
But I got a great ownership group, and they're all either, they either live here now or they're from Kansas City and have a
They
connection.
have deep ties here.
Deep ties to
Yeah,
Kansas
right.
City.
And I think that's important. Yeah, you just can't lose that concept of, don't say it could never happen, because it could
Right.
happen. Not with the way it's going now, and this is what you should really keep striking. Because Mr. Glass could have gone and just gone to highest bidder or whatever, not even called you.
And he didn't.
And he did not. He had other people out in the country that were willing to buy the franchise, and their first thought is, we'll move on to Kansas City.
Yeah.
We'll stay a couple years, and then it'll be like
Right.
the Kings.
This would not have been a good time for out-of-town ownership.
No.
Right now. So
Because they're looking to expand. Baseball.
And so I think our job, my job, and our ownership's job is really to stabilize the future. And that's why this new stadium is really important, because once that gets done, we're here for another 50 years.
Yes,
And that kind of
exactly.
guarantees crossing the century mark. Major League Baseball in Kansas City. That's pretty remarkable.
That really will be. Yeah, and to have a stamp on that's incredible. One last question for you. So you're an ex-athlete, okay? Do you have any superstitions?
Ex-athlete. I guess that's the word.
Yeah, well, you're an athlete at one time.
No,
Come on now.
No, I know.
Yeah.
X is the
Yeah.
operative.
Did you have superstitions growing up? Do you still have
Superstitions?
superstitions? Yeah. Do you have to get to the ballpark at a certain time? Do you have to?
Oh, I still got them. No, I mean, I'll wear the same socks if we haven't. It's crazy.
If you're on a winning streak?
It's crazy stuff.
Are they washed or unwashed as we keep going through here?
And in baseball, you look. I happened to be with Cleveland when we won 22 in a row in 2017.
That's right.
And Terry Francona would rotate who brings the lineup card And it was this guy, Barney Barnett, who was he brought the lineup card for all 22 of those games. And I didn't realize that's what they did. But he didn't go back to the video booth early until we lost. In fact, we lost that to the Royals. You know, the
That's
Royals,
right, you
the
did lose
Royals
to the Royals.
snapped
That's right, yeah.
going for 23 in a row.
Yeah.
And in some ways, being on the Cleveland side then, it was actually a little bit of a relief to lose that game because all the attention and all I think it was draining the energy out of our team, and it was September, so we were getting ready for a playoff. Right?
Yeah, right.
But it was a great experience.
Yeah,
but no, the
awesome.
superstitions are definitely there.
Well, this franchise is in good hands.
Well, thank you.
I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thanks for what you're doing for Kansas
Yeah,
City.
you bet. That's just one. It was my wife's idea, so no, it's like a little
I'm
bit like.
also aware of that.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. Thanks. I just wanted to make sure.
She let me know it was her idea.
I was going to do what Marny thought she was going to do. I thought I was going to retire. Okay. When I was done, that didn't happen. Again, thanks so much
thank you.
for your time.
Thank you,
It's just been great.
Yeah.
This franchise is in great stewardship. So continue on, John.
Well, thank you.
You bet.
There's Just Something About Kansas City is a registered 501c3 nonprofit organization with the mission of documenting the stories that have built our city to inspire and educate generations to come. Our work is made possible by the generous support of local partners such as the Cockrell Family Foundation and the Sherman Family Foundation. For more information about how you can help us share these stories, visit our website at somethingaboutKC.org. Thank you.